It is 6 o'clock, and imagine this, we're having our first committee meeting of the City Council in Malden, Massachusetts. Just imagine this, all via Zoom. But I am joined in this meeting with committee members Amanda Linehan and Neil Anderson, councilors Ward 3 and Ward 7. I'm also joined on this with other fellow councilors, and just bear with me. I want to make sure I don't forget anybody. Council President J. Dean Sika, Council Ward 2 Paul Condon, Councilor Ryan O'Malley, Ward 4, Councilor Dave Kamel, Ward 6, and I thought I saw Councilor at Large Steve Winslow, but I don't see him anymore. Okay, and we also are joined by Assistant City Solicitor Ken Rossetti, welcome, and our Communications Director, Ron Cochran. So this meeting of citizen engagement is basically an informational meeting tonight, and we do have our two guests to speak with us. It is public engagement in the age of COVID-19. So we do hope anyone's listening or watching or joining us, everyone continues to stay safe. I think what I'll do is our clerk of committees, Lisa Cagno, is on. So we officially started, Lisa, at 6:01, and we're gonna move forward with approving the minutes, which is an act that we take when we assemble per open meeting law. So do I hear a motion from my committee members to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so those are passed, and at this point, we're going to ask Ron Cochran to give us some information on how we as a community move forward with communicating with the City Council and the technology information that we need, and the procedures that we need, and the implications that we need to continue to adhere to our open meeting laws and our council rules. So I will this to, oh, there's Councilor Anderson. Wonderful.
Yes, we had Anthony Rodriguez come and hook me up. I don't know what he did, but there's Anthony in the background. There he is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
No problem.
Hey,
that's great. So
a shout out to the IT department.
Yay, that's right. Oh, yeah, very
cool.
Well, Ron, so I don't know if you'd like to kick off the meeting and tell us and tell the community how we can move forward with this technology and this Zoom process, and how we actually get through all this. So
yeah, sure. I mean, I'll do my best to kind of describe where we've come so far, and I know the way you kind of phrase it in the beginning, it's a bit open about how we move forward, but I think maybe what I feel most comfortable speaking kind of authoritatively on would be what we've done so far with respect to meetings, because everything else that we've done electronically, meaning social media outreach, communicating online to our residents during the crisis, those are all things that we've done right along, pre and current coronavirus. We've done that all along. But the new challenge that we're faced with is assembling as meeting bodies electronically. And I think that's what I would. I'm going to focus on that. So I'd say the first thing to do is just in terms of setting the stage. I do have a little bit of a presentation.
Okay, wonderful.
Like to just share. So
yep.
I'm going to share my
Before
screen.
you start, Ron, could I just ask everybody to just really be cognizant of background sounds, and I could also mute you all during this, but I think we can move forward with just kind of being responsible so we can all hear. Ron. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think it's appropriate too that we had our IT director here helping Counselor Anderson, because it's almost like we planned it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we staged something of a challenge to show the real challenges that we for the implementation was not just conducting meetings through Zoom, but also incorporating public comment. So what I've been working on in partnership with solicitor's office, with Solicitor Fallon, as well as Council President Sika, was to then incorporate sort of the next level of what these Zoom meetings could bring us, and that was public comment. So for the past little over a week, probably more like 2 weeks if you include what I was doing on my own, we discovered what I think is a pretty good solution for public comment. And what our plan was is on the 21st, there was some public comments that were submitted via email, and there were enough of them that Council President Sika wanted to make sure that even though we didn't have the set plan in place, there were these public comments that were submitted via email, and her plan was to read those at the 21st meeting. But as you know, we had to adjourn that meeting early, so we didn't get a chance to read those. But then subsequent to that, our plan was to roll out at that time to talk about what the procedure was going to be for public commenting after the fact. And I can get into that, but I know I've talked a lot, so I don't want to hog the whole meeting here, and I'm open to questions, but I can certainly talk about what we had discussed, like I said, with the solicitor's office, as well as with Council President, and what our plans were for public comment, because that kind of wraps this all in. It's the next level of what we were going for in these meetings.
Thank you, Ron. I think that's great. Maybe before I move to the Assistant City Solicitor, Ken Rossetti, is there any questions from anybody that's on the call for Ron Cochran? No? Geez, Ron, you're getting off easy here, huh?
Yeah, no, I'd raise a question. So,
oh, okay, great.
So my question has to do with how do we stop the interference? Have we figured out a way to stop others from the problems that you've pointed out in those other cities?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, the city of Revere did a traditional Zoom meeting, and then they decided against that, and they decided to go with what we already had, which was the webinar style of meeting. And the difference is that, as the case here, like for instance, we have 12 attendees, but they have no capability of speaking or disrupting the meeting. It's only the panelists that have the ability to do those types of things. So we were ahead of the game on that. And a lot of that was because of what I had researched, and I was really nervous about these Zoom bombs and things, and that's why we implemented the webinar style.
Good. That's good.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Linehan.
Thank you, Councilor DiMaria. I just had a quick question, Ron. Is there like a big cost difference between the webinar version and whatever the other version would be? And are we able to get any advantageous pricing as a public entity, or are we out there competing with the private market? Just out of curiosity, like, how is this financially hitting us?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little pricier when you do the webinars. However, and as you rightly point out, the challenge with pricing is this is not something, to my knowledge, that's even on the state contract that I know of. But what we were in the midst of was we had to conduct meetings, so we got it in the same way that every person got it, which was we signed up for accounts. And the challenge there is, I had put in a request, as an example, I put in a request with the sales team saying, hey, can we be converted to a government account? And the person got back to me 2.5 weeks later, asked me a follow-up question, and I asked them, and it's been like a crazy turnaround. So we're a little overspent, but we're not talking about, it's not outrageous costs. It's on the order of, a few $100s a month at this point. But if we start opening up to all the meeting bodies, then we need to talk about some government pricing and some bulk pricing.
That was kind of my next question, and kudos to you for foreseeing that we should go with that version that allows us to prevent the Zoom bombing and the panelists versus participants, because I do think that sets us up nicely to be able to take public comment safely. But I am wondering, like, what are the next steps? Could we do public hearings with this? Is there a next level of meeting type that we need to be thinking about and getting ready for if we're going to be having to do this for, potentially 3 to 6 months or however long this is the order.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first one that comes to mind would be the CPC meeting. So, my intention was to recommend to the chairperson to basically use the same technique that I had been working on with Council President Sika and Solicitor Fallon, which was to use the Q&A. It actually might be a good time to talk about it. There's functionality in Zoom that allows for Q&A. And right now, if I had opened up Q&A, the attendees would have the ability to put in or click that they wanted to ask a question. And what they would do then would be submit what their name and their address is for the record. And it serves two purposes. One is like when you come in as an attendee, sometimes you're like Joe G 1658, or sometimes you're Ron Cochran, or sometimes you're just a phone number. And, for us to be able to use that functionality, it actually explicitly asks the person to identify themselves, which is what you would do in person. You would say, please step up to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. And then the other advantage of that is that it timestamps it. So we get to see who's coming in first, second, third, which is important because if you exceed your half an hour threshold, then you want to know who was actually there first.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anyone else for a question?
I have my hand up.
Okay, Councilor Condon.
And I have my hand up too, also.
Okay, Councilor Murphy, I saw you as an attendee. Did you move over to a panelist?
I think I'm a panelist.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I do
panelist,
see.
I know.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so it'll be Councilor Condon, Councilor Murphy, Councilor Winslow. Go ahead, Councilor Condon.
Yes, Ron, as a chairman of the committee, Councilor DiMaria, what challenges does she face controlling the meeting? Like if I want, as you know, I'm a little light on my social media skills. So if I want to have a meeting as a chairperson and I'm in control of, say, 11 councilors show up, what do I have to do to run the meeting?
So Councilor DiMaria and I had a meeting at, about 1 o'clock this afternoon, and we went over kind of soup to nuts on the different things that I guess could happen. But, you don't always know what challenges you might face. So I would say for each individual committee or actually any meeting body from here on in that wants to meet, like we actually had Cultural Council reach out to us today. We've had other meeting bodies. They're slowly but surely coming in. Myself and the solicitor's office, we're trying to come up with a standardized set of guidelines, not just legal guidelines of what needs to be included on the agenda, but also the different things like you're talking about, like should I mute everybody? Should I keep it open? What constitutes me suggesting something to you versus what you actually have to do, So that would be like if you met as a committee, I would meet with the chairperson and discuss all that.
Like I see Q&A here, and I see participants on icons. When would you hit the participants if you were moderating the meeting?
Yeah, if you're moderating the meeting, your panelists are your people that are in the meeting. And then if you were opening it up to public comment, then you would be reaching out to who's on the attendee list. And then there's a step that you have to take where you actually liven up their mic.
Yeah, Councilor Condon, let me just kind of interrupt you a little bit. Ron Cochran is a great teacher, and we figured out anything that might have gone wrong tonight, and so far I've got my fingers crossed, and I think we're good. So honestly, I feel very confident that I know you'll be able to do it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Murphy?
Thank you. Sorry, I just had to unmute myself. I'm actually learning this myself. Councilor Condon, there is hope for us elders. We're actually getting it. I did have a question. And first of all, Mr. Cochran, I just wanted to thank you for, everything that you've been doing behind the scenes. And it was very nice to hear, all of the challenges that you faced in order to come up with something that would work for us in a very professional way. And I think that that's very important, because to have just jumped off a diving board, not knowing what we were doing, could have landed us in some deep water where we would have sunk instead of swim. And I believe that we are swimming as we move forward. What I'd like to know is you made reference as you stopped and said you've talked enough, but it seems like maybe you have more information about how you think we could move forward. I think I just heard you say that you and Council President Seeker and maybe Anthony Rodriguez had been chatting about this. And, I'd be very interested in hearing, what your thoughts are as to how we continue to move forward with this, and what are the next steps we need to take to make sure that we engage the public and also are able to hold meetings in an effective manner.
Sure. I think probably one of the things that comes to mind is, so whenever I'm asked the question, can something be done? Usually when it comes to computers, there's always a way, right? You can always find a way for things to happen. But at the same time, I see Councilor Kamel, who's a programmer, knows this. Oftentimes when folks ask you for features, they don't fully understand the magnitude of what those features might open up. And, that gets back to the slide that I shared about, technological capabilities versus what your true needs are. So I think we have to really be, cognizant of that. And I'll give you a classic example. So your public meeting, to my knowledge, is by ordinance is a half an hour long, and comments, I think, what are they limited to, either 300 words or 2 minutes? I think
2 minutes and 15 speakers.
Okay, 2 minutes. I kind of
potentially.
Right. So when you think about that, right, in an electronic world, that means if I kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit. 300. The reason why I had 300 words in my head is because that was something that City Solicitor Fallon had come up with, because it's reasonable to expect that that's about a 2-minute speech, and I think that's great. That's something I never would have thought of. And so now you have, for instance, let's say that 15 emails came in, and those are all, let's just say 300 words apiece. Now you come to the meeting, and although you're technically capable of accepting comment through the Zoom live feature, you've already exceeded your number of public comments that you've allocated. So, okay, then there's an example of where, even though the technology gladly will allow for public commenting, your procedure needs to be tightened up. And I just threw it out there and I said, maybe you do half and half. Maybe once, you reach 7 comments via email, maybe you then seal it off and leave the remaining 15 minutes for those that want to speak live in the meeting. Because that's, sometimes people's voices, they feel are more powerful than what's read, into the record via text. So, that gets into, again, why you have to really have your procedure partnered with the technology.
All set, Councilor Murphy?
Well, yes, I'm still, yes. I think that's a really important thing for us to talk about. And also, one of the things is the limit of 15. How do you, which I think is something that, we as the council need to speak to, is how do you, if 15 emails come in and are date stamped, but yet the video, the actual verbiage, okay, so let's say you say there's seven emails, and then you have 7 people calling in, how does that work so that it's fair? I know one of the biggest issues that I had with public comment, which was one of the reasons why I struggled. Well, actually, I kind of didn't vote for it the first time around, was the fact that I didn't want it to just be one side of the equation, whether I was for that equation or against that equation, to be heard. How do we make sure that people get heard? You know what I mean? That, that we don't just have one side of the equation because someone's out there saying, okay, everybody, send in the email or sign up, and then you only hear one point of view. And that was the problem I had the first time around. And that's one of the things that I hope as we discuss how this is going to work, that we make sure that we're fair to both sides of any discussion that happens. So
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think it's also, and I'm glad we're having this meeting, because when you're having these discussions internally, sometimes when you say, well, there's no public comment, that really has like a salty taste to it, right? Like, how in the world could we possibly stifle the public? It's so important. But meanwhile, now you're looking behind the curtain now, right? As to why this isn't an easy answer, why you don't just flip the switch and say, open up the floodgates, because there's so many challenges. It could go the reverse, and you could wind up having what poor Everett had to go through. And I think it's a steady balance between those two. And I think it's really important to do that. But to ultimately answer your question, Councilor Murphy, it really, as I've presented, the system is capable of both live commenting as well as you guys receiving emails. And frankly, it's up to you guys really to come up with the rest of the story on this one and how you want to implement it, but it's clearly capable.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Councilor Winslow has his hand up. Is that right?
Yep.
There you
Can you hear
go.
me?
Okay.
So my question is about the technical side. I mean, I guess when I'm sitting here and I'm looking, I seem to be going smoothly, but I mean, I've heard in some circumstances the audio can be herky-jerky and other type of things. So what about that kind of technical barrier? Like if someone's frozen up and, that's one of the questions. Do we have to, especially the first meeting, I know City Clerk Lucy, we had a lot of problems losing him. Are we getting better there? How do we make sure that we're not being held up by technical issues? And what kind of rules do we have if someone's just not getting on? So.
Yeah, I think it's another classic example of, rules versus technology. And in this case, they don't really converge because, I think what you have to wind up doing is creating rules around what is likely to happen. If you think you're going to cover all the edge cases, and again, I'll go back to Councilor Kamel on this from the programmer side of things, you don't accommodate for all the possible edge cases. Sometimes what you do is you build a very big net to catch just about everything. And then you just say, look, we're going to approach all the errors, as best we can, because again, let's give all of us credit here. We're all in a new world here, right? So we're really trying our best. And I hope that the residents can understand the challenges that we're facing and that we're trying to respect, what they're looking for, as well as how we conduct the meeting. But back to your point, Councilor Winslow, how do we accommodate for those challenges? The answer is you can't, because these are individual challenges. Like the example you gave was City Clerk Lucy was experiencing Wi-Fi issues at his home. And just until minutes before the meeting, everything looked fine and nobody could really understand. So what I did instead was we provisioned him a different device so that he wouldn't be facing some of these. So sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's, Councilor Anderson thought he had it locked up last week, and lo and behold, computers are finicky, man, and they can sometimes get in there. So I think, again, you can't rely on technology because we're looking at 13 different people here with 13 different networks, maybe 7 different devices, all sorts of different things. There's no way to come down the middle and catch everything. So maybe it gets down to rules, how do you affect if somebody is dropped out of the meeting,
So in effect, like my question is like, who is monitoring that to make sure like my audio is even getting out to people, and who can alert the chair? So I guess that's maybe a rule we almost need to have, is that, I mean, I know, I was just looking at Robert's rules, and one of the key things is just to be able to audibly speak to each other as a group is the core principle of what a deliberative body is. So that's important that we have someone who's monitoring to make sure we are all able to communicate. So I guess that's one of the things we got to figure out, is to make sure that people can both speak and hear, and keeping.
It's a good point. Yeah, I mean, to date, it's been me. I've been proctoring every meeting that's been conducted. But, obviously that doesn't scale very well because it's just me. So which is why I've been trying to work with the, with people like, Councilor Di Maria, who's basically doing this meeting. And before that, City Council President Sika, who was, when I hand the controls over to her, she's managing the whole thing. I jump in from time to time. But like the chairperson of the CPC, Julia Sino, ran her meeting by herself last time and had some challenges, and she was able to do it. So I think it varies on different capabilities.
So on your part, Ron, is there anything that Zoom offers to help monitor that in terms of connections or monitoring, how well audio is coming in? Is there any technology like that? So is that...
Not to my knowledge, but I'm not sure that is necessarily. I can't picture an environment where you're monitoring everybody's throughput because that's so variable. I had a funny thing happen to me where I was on a meeting one time and my son started playing video games in the basement and he crashed my Zoom meeting. So how in the world could you possibly accommodate for all of those things? So I think we just have to make sure that we're given the best practices, which are, make sure that you're on a clean network, that you've got a good signal. It's probably going to have to be a lot of self-checks.
So, all right. Thanks. Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Winslow. Councilor O'Malley is next.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank you for kind of organizing this. I kind of feel like, as Ron said, this is kind of this committee, citizen engagement, public engagement is kind of the perfect place for this discussion to, I think, have happen, to really kind of dive deep into it. Ron, I feel for you because you have to be on all of these meetings. And I'm wondering if one of the action items we can take from this is a training for all committee chairs so that we are able to manage our own meetings and you don't have to be on every call, because I don't think it's fair to you personally. What do you think about that?
I mean, I'm happy to do it. I've kind of been doing that already. I'm sort of engaged in that especially with the new meeting bodies. And I actually have a plan to meet with the city clerk and with Lisa Cagno tomorrow so that they can start scheduling your meetings for you. Because there is just a simple feature of actually creating a Zoom meeting. And that's been something I've been doing as well. So yeah, no, I'm absolutely happy to do that. It certainly makes things more scalable, and I'm not looking for anybody to feel bad necessarily for what I've been doing. I feel a great sense of pride in what I've been able to work with everybody on to accomplish this, because I think this really shows, I think Malden has shined really bright through this, and that makes me feel, pretty proud that we've been able to do this very smoothly. So putting in some extra hours, it's part of the job. And if anything, I learned from my boss, Mayor Christensen, that's how you make Malden shine, is by putting in that extra work and making sure that it's the right thing before you release it to the public and before you hastily put out something just for the sake of putting it out. So anyway, original question, yes, happy to do that. Conduct a training session, and it'd probably be on a larger scale. It'd probably be not just you as a meeting body, but probably others too, so we can get this going to the greater.
I think that's a great point. One of the things I'd say is, if you need any help with that, one of the things I used to do in past life is write SOPs and process documents. It's something where if you are computer illiterate, you should be able to pick up this document, and it literally tells you each button to click, so that if something happens, you know exactly what you need to do. So if you want any help with that, feel free to let me know.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
One of the things that I know we kind of talked about offline is, community meetings. One of the traditional job responsibilities of a ward counselor is to have, neighborhood meetings, community meetings for things that are occurring. It's kind of a gray area between, City of Malden responsibility and just the ward responsibility. I'm assuming that would kind of be similar. Every ward councilor probably would just get trained if they wanted to have a neighborhood meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think given the way it is right now, that would make the most sense. We're all familiar with it. There are platforms that are better set up for that style meeting, but sometimes, what people are familiar with, especially in this day and age, because we don't know how long this is going to last, right? And we don't know if, who knows, maybe, heaven forbid, we go back and then there's another surge, and we might be right back in this in November. You never know. You don't know, but Zoom right now is winning because it's familiarity, and most people are using it, to talk to grandma and to have city council meetings, So I would say I wouldn't want to derail that familiarity, and I would say that's what you should use now, because again, we have the licenses, we're managing it. Why not? Everybody's familiar with it, and yes, you could absolutely conduct one of these meetings in this same format. A webinar would be fantastic. And there's these other features too that, we could unleash on something like that I think would be excellent. Sharing, you can have polls, you can have, sharing video, all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot of really neat things that could be done.
One of the questions, and you kind of talked about this earlier, when you start having more people who are going to need to use this, account access and managing all of that, would you envision us all sharing one account? We can all use it like one at a time, or would each of us get a separate account where we can have our neighborhood meetings on our own accord?
I don't know that I have a firm answer now, because I think a lot of it is budget, so I think what happens is these things can get pricey if you don't really watch where you're going. And what it is, it's usually a per user fee. And if you start opening it up to everyone, that might be difficult. So, I don't know. This is just me thinking off the cuff, but, maybe there's a public meeting Zoom for the council, and that's one license. And why? Because you're never going to have competing public meetings on the same night, right? So maybe you share that. So I'm happy to kind of spitball some ideas about how we can do it. But for now, I'm trying to be conservative, because we're certainly facing budget challenges coming up. So I'm trying to be as conservative as possible.
That's actually a great point. However we can do this in the most efficient but also cost-effective way is kind of the way to go. It sounds like you have that under control. I just wanted to briefly mention two last things. Councillor Winslow, when it comes to connections, at least from the experiences that I've had, I think we kind of need to police ourselves a bit, both individually but also as a body. So if any of us are coming in choppy, it's probably best for the others to kind of speak up and let us know that, hey, you're not coming in clearly. I think also getting to know your house and kind of where you have the strongest signal for whatever device you're using, and making sure you're taking your meetings in those locations. And whether or not you're using a laptop or your phone, there's always a little symbol that tells you how strong your Wi-Fi or your signal is. And that's something you probably also need to kind of take a look at and just be aware of it. And when it comes to public comment, I know we talked about that, rather than making it really overly complicated, because I think that when we first rolled out public comment, we planned for it to be really onerous on us. And we were expecting long lists of people wanting to talk. But I think, as we know, we've never actually reached the 15 people speaking limit. So I'm wondering if the easiest way to do this is just to remove the cap and see how that goes. And if occasionally there are a number of people that want to come speak, maybe it's in the best interests of the community that we just take the time to listen that night, but not overly restrict the ability to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. Councilor Murphy, I do see your hand up, but I do want to just get to our Assistant City Solicitor about some of the guidelines that their department has created for public comment. And I see we have a lot of attendees on this call, so I think they're concerned and anxious. What is the process now? So, and I know you work very hard on it, so I'm going to just give you the floor for a minute. And Councilor Murphy, I will come back to you. Thank you. Mr. Rossetti?
Thank you, Chair. Certainly, I'd be happy to speak to these, but I would also welcome deferring to Council President Sika because she's been at the forefront of
This would be an example of a time.
Yeah. Assistant City Solicitor, your voice.
You're breaking up.
And perhaps make that as part of paper that could be submitted. All right, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
Can you hear me now?
your voice is breaking.
Are you able to
up.
hear me now?
So,
Can you hear me better now? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you caught or missed of what I just said, but I'm happy to speak to those guidelines. I'm also happy to defer to the council president because she's been at the forefront of that effort, and perhaps can have a paper submitted that be reported back to the full council with guidelines for public comment at these remote meetings. Basically, what these guidelines try to do is emulate in a remote environment what public participation has looked like at live meetings, with a respect for decorum, with a respect for time limits, with time limits not only in terms of what can be offered by way of content at a remote meeting, but also a time limit, date and time limit for those people who wish to submit written commentary so that their emails can be appropriately and timely date stamped for submission.
Madam Chairperson, is anyone else having trouble hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
Ken, you're not coming through clearly.
Since the chair was.
Yeah, Mr. Rossetti, the voice is really not working on the Zoom call. So
my apologies.
yeah, so maybe I'll ask Council Sika, Council President, to review the information that we all received this week from our solicitor's office about the procedure for public comment and how we're moving forward through this Zoom world.
Great, thank you. So everyone should have received that. If you didn't, just let me know. We can resend it. Ron and Greg and I last week, we went over and figured out all the little loopholes. We have to put it on the docket next Tuesday as a paper, so hopefully we can suspend the rules to pass it that evening and not prolong the public comment portion of our meetings any further, because in order for us to accept the public comment, we have to vote to agree to the terms. I'm not necessarily sure that we should remove the cap of the limits, because last Tuesday we received 15 emails before the meeting on Tuesday. So I think that, you know, the public definitely wants to be heard. I think we should still limit the time to the 30 minutes with the 15 people, up to 2 minutes apiece. So hopefully next Tuesday there'll be a paper on the docket that we can vote on, and we can, you know, maybe we can take that vote before we actually have the public comment portion of the meeting, and we can make it work for next week.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilor Anderson.
Yes, just a technical question first. I've tried to raise my hand, and I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
So there have been other meetings that we've had that I've had the ability to click on something that was a icon to raise your hand. So we might want to see how that, I don't know why I don't have that. At any rate, my point is that with regards to the problems that we're likely to have, I think we're all bright enough to know that this is only the third or fourth time that we've been having the meeting, including the trial runs that we've had, and we've gotten better at it each time. So I think we can kind of work through it all. I don't think there's anything that's all that complicated that we're not going to be able to work through. I think Ron has done an excellent job of being the technical person that's been here to help out. I've had problems at my home computer, and Anthony Rodriguez has been here to help me. So I think with a little bit of practice, we're going to have no problem whatsoever. I think we all are on the same page in terms of wanting to be able to cooperate and make sure this works well, allowing the input to come in. I do not think we ought to remove the cap. If it turns out that there happens to be a subject matter that requires a great deal of extended participation, we can always do it at that meeting. We can always remove that at that meeting by suspending the rules at that meeting if we get a 2/3 vote. So I think we have the flexibility. If we have the will, we have the capability, we can make it happen. I'm encouraged by what it is that we're doing here. And the idea of having pre-training for those of us who are going to run meetings, I think is a great idea. And it's probably been shown that any of you who have been hosting the meetings, it didn't take you that long to get up to speed to make it work. So I'm encouraged by what I see here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Councilor Murphy, go right ahead. There you go.
Thank you. I think it's something we can probably take up at a later date. I just wanted to have more of a discussion with Ron, and I know we're coming up on 7 o'clock, so I don't want to prolong this,
Right.
About how in the future, and Ron, Mr. Cochran, please don't feel that you have to answer this tonight, but I do think if this is our method of operating going forward, and it is our way of communicating and having our work move forward, we shouldn't be curtailed by a budgetary perspective. We might need to have two committee meetings at one time, et cetera. So I think just as a body, at some point, we'll probably ask you for, what does it take to have multiple seats so that we can actually, accommodate more than one meeting at a certain time. And as I said, you don't have to get into that this evening, but that certainly is something I think that we're all going to be very interested in kind of finding out as we move forward.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Thank you. Assistant City Solicitor, you have your hand up. Did you want to speak?
Yeah. And once again, councilors, my apologies for the earlier reception issues.
Yeah, it's still kind of foggy. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to stress that what we're talking about here with respect to remote participation in meetings, it is true that during this emergency period, there's been a relaxation to some extent of certain aspects of open meeting law. Are you still not hearing me?
Yeah, it's terrible. I'm so sorry, Mr. Rossetti. It really is.
My apologies, Chair. And I'm getting a wrong Wi-Fi signal on my computer, so I'm not sure what might be happening here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And it was important that you speak too. I apologize. Let me just take a time check. So we have 5 minutes. It looks like, is there anyone? Oh, Councilor O'Malley, do you have your hand up?
I do. I was just going to say, I think that some of us may be focusing too much on having our video showing necessarily, and you might have better data upload if you're not uploading the video. So there's also an option to call in over your phone, and then you're not going to be even going to be using data in that respect. So I think that if you've ever had an issue with connection in the past or in another meeting, it's probably best for all parties to utilize the phone option, which I think, Ron, you might be able to explain a little bit more about how that works. But I definitely think that that's something that we should be considering, because while it is great to see each other's faces, I don't think it's necessarily a requirement to conduct business. For instance, the Malden Housing Authority did theirs as a conference call at 5 o'clock today. And the only other thing I'd say is we talked to Councilor Murphy, your perspective. I've participated in Zoom meetings where we have breakout sessions. So you're actually able to be divided into different rooms, and those rooms could be the different subcommittees. I think the real challenge is how those meetings are documented, whether or not they actually need to be recorded or not, and how they're recorded. But that's just something I think we can think about kind of offline. But I think it's a great point, Councilor Murphy.
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. And time check and be respectful for our committee of the whole meeting. It is 6:57. Yep, thank you. So I just to kind of wrap it all up, I just want to say that it's really been a pleasure to challenge myself to do something like this under the direction of our communications director. And I'm really happy that the City Council has shown leadership to do that. And without anything else, is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Do
moved.
we stay on this
Thank
channel?
you.
Do we stay
No,
on
we
this?
have to,
No,
we
you
have
have
to
to
go
go
to
to the
the
different
next
one.
one. Yeah.
Second for the motion?
I'll second.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson made the motion, seconded by Councilor Linehan. Thank you all so much.
Are we going to vote it?
Please, all in favor?
We have to vote it individually.
Councilor Anderson.
Anderson, yes.
Councilor Linehan.
Linehan, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, all
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank
Thank you.
you.